we're going to just be going over how to do some of your bonding questions for your homework. Just because I know sometimes it's hard to take the transition from the notes to the homework without me there walking around the classroom helping you. So, you don't need to write anything down. If you want to have some examples, you're welcome to write these down in your notes, but you can also just go to what questions you're confused about and see if I'm talking about them. They're on the side right here. So, for the questions 1 through 8, use your PowerPoint. So many people do their homework and they Google everything, and that takes way longer. If you just use the PowerPoint and the notes that you've copied down from the PowerPoint, it's going to be so much easier, and you're going to know what I'm looking for, because all the information is in that PowerPoint. So 1 through 8, just look at your PowerPoint or the notes that you've taken and write the information. It's almost straight, just copying from the PowerPoint to the questions. All right. Number 9 through 10. It's going to be a chart like this, so you might be like, oh my gosh, a chart, and then skip it. But don't skip it, because we're going to talk about how you can figure it out. So, this chart, on the top, you're going to have a substance A and a substance B. This is information about substance A and substance B. The first thing is the melting point. So you have to look and say substance A or substance B. You're going to have different numbers, so make sure you look at your numbers. But I'll do this practice problem so you can take this information and go to the different problem. So substance A has a melting point of 830 degrees Celsius. That's really high. So that means it doesn't melt easily. It has a high melting point. It has a 72.8 solubility, which is also high. So that means it's really soluble. It can mix well with water. And then it's a good conductor. So we have to think of this as a covalent or an ionic bond. It has a high melting point, it has high solubility, and it's a good conductor. So this one is going to be an ionic bond. All right, the next one is going to be, we'll have to figure it out. And so the melting point is at 52 degrees Celsius. You'll notice it's a lot lower than this one. So this has a lower melting point. It also has a solubility of 5.1, and it's a poor conductor. So this is all lower, and it's a poor conductor. So that tells us that this is a covalent bonded molecule. So on your homework, you need to look at the chart and tell yourself, does it have a high melting point or a low melting point? Is it really soluble? Is it not soluble? Is it a good conductor or a poor conductor? If it's, high melting, high solubility, good conductor, that means it's going to be ionic. If it's low melting, low solubility, poor conductor, covalent. So you're going to have to think through that and figure it out. All right. The next one, 11 through 14, it's going to say that, I think it's question saying that these two elements are bonded together and asking you if it's a covalent bond or if it's an ionic bond. So if we have K and Cl and they're bonded together, on your periodic table, you'll notice that Cl is over here and it's a non-metal, and K is over here and that's a metal. So because this is a metal and a non-metal, you know that this is going to be an ionic bond. So if anything is between a metal and a non-metal, it's going to be ionic. This next one is C and O too. So O is over here, C is over here. They're both non-metals. So non-metals bonding together. You know that when two non-metals bond together, it's going to be covalent. So that's how you do questions 11 through 14. You find where they are on your periodic table, you see if they're metals or non-metals, and then you say if it's ionic or if it's covalent. Number 15 is about polar molecules, asking you if it's equal or unequal sharing. So if you remember, the definition of a polar molecule, also found on your PowerPoint, is an unequal sharing of electrons. Well, nonpolar molecules are an equal sharing of electrons. Alright, so those definitions are going to be really important for you to do number 15. Okay? It's unequal and it's equal. Number 16 then, it's asking you for 4 different molecules, and you're either going to say if they're polar, you can just write a P, or if they're nonpolar, and you can do an NP. So let's look at HBr and decide if it's polar or nonpolar. So if we have our periodic table again, H is over here, Br is over here. So remember, Br is a lot more negative, a lot more electronegative, because as we go this way, it gets more electronegative. Which means it really wants electrons. So Br really wants electrons. H is over here. on the left side. So it is not as electronegative. It doesn't want electrons as much. So when H and Br bond together, remember, they're going to do a covalent bond, so they're going to be sharing 2 electrons. But the electrons are going to hang out closer to B. So say my red dots are my electrons. When they're sharing it, like maybe they're sharing it like this, where the electrons are a lot closer to our B than to our H. And so it makes it so that B is partially negative, and H is partially positive. Remember we looked at these signs, partially negative, partially positive. So since there's an unequal sharing, since B is pulling the electrons more towards it, it's going to cause a partial positive because it doesn't have as many electrons around H, and a partial negative because Br has more electrons around it. So this one is going to be a polar molecule. So then let's look at F2. So if we look at F2, F is about here on the periodic table. The other F is also here on the periodic table. So when they're bonded together, they both want the electrons about the same. So they're both going to be sharing it, and the electrons aren't going to be closer to one or to the other. They're going to just be right down the middle of the bond. They're going to just be sharing those 2 electrons. So there's not going to be any partial negative, partial positive, stuff like that. So since they're going to be sharing it equally, equal sharing, remember, is nonpolar. So this is going to be a nonpolar one. So NP. So you're going to go through each of those and think about that. Is one going to be pulling electrons? Is it more electronegative, or is it less and so it's not going to want it as much? Or are they about equal and so they're going to be sharing equally? Hopefully this can help you do all of your homework. But again, if you have any questions, email me. I also like to write on your homework if you're missing a question about what you can do to fix it, and then you can go back and fix it during the week. So try to get it turned in early so that I can give you some feedback. And let me know if you need any more help. Good luck, guys.